Welcome, dear thrill seekers and the curious, to the realm where the ordinary meets the eerie. Join us in our hotel room for a late checkout for this next tale if you dare. In the perplexing enigma referred to as the Room 1046 mystery, an individual who identified himself as Roland T. Owen checked into Room 1046 at the Hotel President in Kansas City, Missouri, on January 2, 1935. Within a mere 48 hours, his life would come to a tragic end. When Owen was discovered in his hotel room, he lay on the brink of death, bearing the brutal scars of a severe assault. The looming question was, who was responsible for the demise of Roland T. Owen, and what could have motivated such a heinous act? However, the man going by Roland T. Owen carried a heavy shroud of enigma with him, offering more riddles than explanations. His conduct during his brief stay in Room 1046 confounded both hotel staff and authorities, and as the investigation into his murder unfolded, it became evident that even his identity was a falsehood. The true identity of Roland T. Owen remains elusive, as does the complete story of what transpired within that room. While we may never uncover all the answers, the fragments of this puzzle are as haunting as any resolution could ever be. Welcome, dear thrill seekers and the curious, to the realm where the ordinary meets the eerie. Join us in our hotel room for a late checkout for this next tale if you dare. On January 2, 1935, a man who identified himself as Roland T. Owen checked in at the Hotel President shortly after 1 p.m. His arrival came with specific requests. He provided an address in Los Angeles, paid for only one night, and requested a room that overlooked the hotel's inner courtyard instead of the street-facing ones. According to witnesses, this man appeared to be between the ages of 20 and 30 and bore a distinctive cauliflower ear, a common condition among boxers and wrestlers. Additionally, he had a scar on the side of his scalp, which he attempted to conceal by combing his hair over it. During his ascent to his room, he refrained from divulging the purpose of his visit to the city. However, he did mention his dissatisfaction with his previous night's stay at the nearby Mulebach Hotel, citing what he believed to be an exorbitant nightly rate of $5 as the reason for his departure. Roland T. Owen, or whatever his true identity might have been, arrived at the Hotel President without any luggage. Witnesses noted that he was neatly dressed and wore a black overcoat. The only belongings he had in his possession were a hairbrush, a comb, and a tube of toothpaste, all of which were stored in his overcoat pocket. Upon entering his room with the porter's assistance, he placed these three items on the sink. Strangely, all three items would disappear before Owen's departure, further deepening the mystery surrounding him. From the moment he checked in, the man who identified himself as Roland T. Owen displayed peculiar behavior that puzzled the hotel staff. Whenever maids or porters entered his room, they encountered an unusual scene. The room was kept in darkness, with the shades drawn, and the only source of light was a single desk lamp. One day, when Mary Soptic, a hotel maid who had recently returned from a few days off, was assigned to clean Room 1046, she encountered this enigmatic guest. Upon entering the dimly lit room, she offered to return later for cleaning, but the man insisted she proceed. Mary later reported to the police that Owen appeared fearful or troubled, and he consistently preferred to keep the room shrouded in darkness. During the course of her cleaning duties in Owen's room, the maid was confronted with a series of bizarre incidents. When she initially began cleaning, Owen requested that she leave the door unlocked, claiming he expected a friend to arrive in a few minutes. Later, upon her return to the room, she found Owen lying on the neatly made bed, fully clothed, appearing to be asleep. A note placed on the desk stated, "Don, I will be back in 15 minutes. Wait." The following morning, while attending to her duties, she overheard Owen engaged in a brief telephone conversation. He was heard saying, "No, Don, I don't want to eat. I am not hungry." In another unsettling encounter, during the afternoon when she was delivering fresh towels, the maid eavesdropped on a conversation between two men inside Room 1046. When she knocked on the door, a gruff voice she couldn't identify responded, informing her that they didn't require towels. Curiously, she knew the room had no towels, as she had already removed them earlier that day. In an ironic twist, the occupant of room 1048, located next door to the individual who identified himself as Roland T. Owen, happened to be Gene Owen from Lee's Summit, M.O. Gene Owen had no familial relation to her mysterious neighbor and was completely unaware of his identity. Nonetheless, she later informed the police that she had heard disturbances on her floor throughout the night, primarily consisting of boisterous conversations and profanities. She briefly contemplated contacting the hotel's front desk but ultimately refrained from doing so. On that fateful night, there appeared to be a rather rowdy gathering taking place in room 1055, which might have been the source of the disturbances noticed by Gene Owen. However, this was not the only peculiar occurrence. The elevator operator on duty reported transporting a woman, a frequent guest of the hotel, with various men to multiple different floors in search of a specific customer who was consistently punctual. Despite an exhaustive hour-long search throughout the hotel, it seemed that she never located the individual she was seeking. On the evening of January 3rd, at approximately 11 p.m., a water department employee named Robert Lane was hailed down by an individual who closely resembled Roland T. Owen, not far from the hotel president. The man Lane picked up was clearly injured, sporting a significant scrape on his arm that raised concerns of potentially more severe injuries. Strangely, despite the chilly January night in Kansas City, he was only wearing his shirt sleeves, which was quite unusual given the weather conditions. Lane, noticing the man's injuries, remarked, "You look as if you've been through quite an ordeal." When the man requested a ride to find a taxi, his response was unsettling, "I'll deal with that, redacted, tomorrow." The newspapers from that era did not publish the explicit language used by the man, leading us to wonder about the identity of the person he may have been referring to. On the following Friday morning, after the man who resembled Roland T. Owen had been assisted by Robert Lane in the street, a peculiar situation unfolded. The hotel operator at the hotel president noticed that the phone in room 1046 was inexplicably off the hook. Concerned about this, she decided to send a bellhop to investigate the matter. Upon reaching room 1046, the bellhop encountered a locked door adorned with a "Do Not Disturb" sign. He knocked repeatedly, seeking a response from within. Eventually, he heard a deep voice from behind the door instructing him to come in. Despite the voice's assurance, the door remained securely locked, leaving the bellhop in a state of perplexity. He knocked again, and this time the voice ordered, "Turn on the lights." Since he couldn't access the room and the situation seemed increasingly unusual, the bellhop resorted to shouting, "Put the phone back on the hook." He then departed from the scene and returned to the hotel lobby, unable to determine the cause of the off-hook phone. On the morning of Friday, January 4th, a perplexing situation continued in room 1046 as the telephone remained off the hook. Initially, a bellhop had been dispatched to rectify the issue, but his efforts were limited to shouting instructions through the door, urging the occupant to reconnect the phone. Approximately an hour later, with the phone still disconnected, another bellhop named Harold Pike was tasked with addressing the ongoing matter. Upon reaching room 1046, Pike knocked on the door but received no response. He utilized his passkey to unlock the door, revealing an unusual scene within. The room's occupant lay in bed, completely unclothed. Pike would later recount to the police that he observed what seemed to be dark shadows beneath the bed covers. However, he attributed this to the assumption that the room's inhabitant was inebriated. His primary task was to restore the phone to its cradle, which he accomplished before returning downstairs. Remarkably, he noticed that the door had been locked from the outside, adding yet another layer of mystery to the unfolding events. Several hours elapsed since the peculiar events in room 1046 had begun. The hotel operator, increasingly exasperated by the recurring issue of the off-hook phone and the enigmatic guest, Roland T. Owen, who remained undressed and unconscious on his bed, found herself dealing with the same predicament once more. Exasperated by the situation, she dispatched Randolph Probst, the same bellhop who had initially escorted Owen to his room 2 days prior, to address the problem. Probst approached room 1046, knocked on its door, but received no response. Taking matters into his own hands, he utilized his passkey to unlock the door and gain entry. Upon entering the room, Probst was met with a shocking sight. Roland T. Owen was inside, but he was in a dire state. Owen knelt on the floor, a few feet from the door, in a severely injured condition. Probst swiftly illuminated the room, revealing a harrowing scene. Blood was splattered throughout the room, marking the beginning of a puzzling and sinister discovery. Upon entering room 1046, authorities were confronted with a grim and bewildering scene. Roland T. Owen, gravely injured and on the verge of death, lay before them. He had endured brutal torture and stabbing, and an unsettling revelation emerged during the subsequent investigation. Many of the bloodstains found in the room were hours old, implying that Owen had been subjected to the attack before the first bellhop had discovered him, appearing seemingly unconscious on his bed. Soon after his arrival at the hospital, Owen lapsed into a coma. During the brief moments when he was still conscious, he provided an enigmatic and cryptic explanation for the extent of his injuries, claiming that he had fallen against the tub. Tragically, Roland T. Owen succumbed to his injuries and passed away in the hospital that fateful night. Following the tragic demise of the man who had adopted the pseudonym Roland T. Owen, authorities were faced with the perplexing revelation that this was not his real name. In an effort to shed light on his true identity, the police published a sketch of the deceased individual in newspapers, imploring the public, "Do you recognize this man?" It became evident that the man who had checked into the hotel had done so under an assumed name, concealing his true persona. One element of his narrative was corroborated by hotel staff: his stay at the Mulebach the night before. Although the hotel's records did not include any guests registered as Roland T. Owen, employees there did recognize the sketch of the deceased individual. He had previously checked in under the name Eugene K. Scott, also hailing from Los Angeles. Nevertheless, a significant conundrum persisted as the police diligently investigated the case. Despite their efforts, they could not identify any missing persons from Los Angeles matching either the name Roland T. Owen or Eugene K. Scott, nor did any other missing individuals from Los Angeles correspond to the physical description of the deceased man. The true identity of Roland T. Owen remained as elusive as the circumstances surrounding his demise. The room had been stripped of nearly all its contents, leaving behind only a scant few clues and an unsettling atmosphere. Roland T. Owen himself was found unclothed, and all of his garments had vanished, along with the meager assortment of personal items he had brought into the room: a hairbrush, comb, and toothpaste. Curiously, no weapon was discovered that could account for the severe injuries inflicted upon Owen. What remained within the room was a peculiar collection of items: a hairpin, a safety pin, an unlit cigarette, a bottle of diluted sulfuric acid, and a necktie label bearing the inscription "Botany Worsen Mills." In the bathroom, 2 glasses were present, one resting on a shelf, the other shattered within the sink. Among the sparse evidence, the police identified 4 small fingerprints on the telephone stand, which they speculated might belong to a woman. However, the identity of the individual associated with these prints remained an enigma, as they were never successfully traced or identified. Despite numerous attempts to ascertain the identity of Roland T. Owen, no one could provide a definitive answer. Authorities were on the verge of arranging a burial for him as an unclaimed John Doe when a surprising turn of events occurred. A mysterious caller contacted the funeral home and requested a delay, pledging to send the necessary funds for a proper funeral. Within a month, an unmarked envelope arrived at the funeral home, containing an ample sum to cover all expenses. The unidentified man was laid to rest in Kansas City's Memorial Park Cemetery with the name Roland T. Owen, and though no one from the public attended, the police were present. Remarkably, 13 American Beauty roses adorned his grave, a gesture orchestrated by an anonymous caller who claimed to be acting on behalf of his sister. The caller offered $5 for the arrangement and included a note with the roses that conveyed a simple yet poignant message: "Love forever, Louise." A year after the events in room 1046, a woman came across a magazine photo of the man who had used the name Roland T. Owen. She claimed the man was her son, Artemis Ogletree, who had left home at the age of 17. However, while authorities leaned toward accepting her identification, it raised more questions than answers. Firstly, Artemis Ogletree turned out to be significantly younger than the age initially attributed to Roland T. Owen. Additionally, Mrs. Ogletree had received several letters ostensibly from her son and even a phone call from someone claiming to be a friend of Artemis. Curiously, one of the letters and the phone call stated that her son was in Egypt. All of these communications occurred after Roland T. Owen had already been buried. This identification did little to unravel the mystery surrounding the reasons behind his murder or the identities of the other enigmatic figures involved, such as Don and Louise. In 2003, John Horner, a librarian at the Kansas City Public Library, received an anonymous phone call from an individual who claimed to have stumbled upon newspaper clippings related to the Room 1046 mystery while going through the belongings of a deceased person. What added to the intrigue was the caller's mention of having found something alluded to in the newspaper clippings, although they never disclosed the nature of this discovery. As of today, the enigma surrounding the events that unfolded in Room 1046 remains shrouded in uncertainty. The most recent entries in the police department's cold case files, dating back to the 1950s, simply state, "I will continue to pursue the investigation." As we draw the curtains on yet another chilling journey into the depths of the unknown, I want to extend my gratitude to all you brave souls who joined us on this expedition. Remember, the world is a tapestry woven with threads of mystery, and we're here to unravel its darkest secrets. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring that bell. You'll be the first to know when we unearth our next chilling chronicle. Until then, stay curious, stay cautious, and never stop exploring the realms of the macabre and the miraculous. Signing off from Creepy Tales and Curiosities. Remember, the night may be dark, but there's always a story waiting to be uncovered. Good night, and pleasant nightmares.